Hamilton is not in the house this evening. And look who she left in charge. It's sort of like Dr. Seuss, where the parents are away and you never know what might happen. I'm Amanda Krugliak, and I'm the curator at the Institute for the Humanities. And we are partners in this marvelous project with Sonya Clark. It represents a second part of what has been a two-part residency. Sonya was first here working with students at DOS and American Cultures and Women's Studies and stamps in color from the Stamp School of Art and Design, writing stories and thinking about identity and hair and race, and it was spectacular. The students were amazing, so I want to just say that. Big shout out for all of you that participated. Tonight, there won't be a Q&A right after this talk. Instead, it will be at the Institute, where Sonya's show is opening at the Institute Gallery, and we will have questions there and also receptions, so we hope that you can attend that with us. Christina's not here, so I'm going to cut to the quick. First, Sonya Clark is an artist with integrity in regards to craft, to the making. Whether working with beads, cloth, combs, metal, or hair, we understand fully the finished work as the continuation of the human gesture. And then there is the continuity of vision, the authentic and intuitive way that one thing circuitously leads to another in her process as an artist. That her work becomes figuratively and literally about the emergent threads, once lost and then found, like a myriad of thin blue veins that when mined reveals a pulse. That her work is as much about the ties that bind us, the strands and tendrils of DNA as loose ends and hems come undone. The painstaking raveling and unraveling of it all. Because in all that, there is hope. Hope of being repurposed, mended, revised, and converted, a truth closer than before. For ArtPrize 2014 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Clark's Haircraft project that presented hairdressing and braiding within an art context was awarded not only the 2D juried prize, but also shared the Grand Juroried Prize. That's no easy feat. Clark's seminal works deconstructing the Confederate flag coincided historically with the 150th anniversary of the end of the Civil War. And when a racist white male youth murdered innocent black people in a church, and that flag came down outside of the South Carolina Capitol, Clark's work became a zeitgeist and troubled deeply about what it meant to continue that work in the face of such human tragedy. She was reassured by her friends that the work was a place where people can put their sentiments about that. I can go on as an arts curator about the work of Sonya Clark and her many accomplishments. But what I really want to tell you about is three women in a rental car: Sonya, Maria, and me. We were headed to Cranbrook, where Sonya went to graduate school, to see the work of her mentor and friend, Nick Cave. We had a passion, too, we discovered, for vintage clothes. And in that car, we talked about our lives. We talked about our hair. And between that and Nick Cave, the sky opened up beyond the traffic of 96 and the Midwest cloud cover. And my friend Maria said that despite the threat of reverting to an afro when wet, she loves swimming. Sonya talked about braids like art on her head when she was a little girl. And I said, I think I actually went blonde because it reminds me of my mother. And we said to ourselves, so when does it end? At what point? Do you color it? Do you cut it off? Should you iron it, curl it? Should you wear glasses or lower your voice or raise it at the end of a sentence? Erase where you're from, your roots? At what point would you be seen? Would you be taken seriously, finally, as an equal? When would it end? When is enough enough? Sonya said, there are people that you just do not want at your table. But then there are people that are worth the investment because of relationships. So we make the effort, helping them understand how we feel. How can we say that? How they would feel if they were us. It is with great respect and deep affection now that I introduce to you Sonya Clark. Sonya Clark. Sonya Clark.
It is a great pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. I am so very, very happy to be in my second home. I'm going to start with this image, so I'll explain a little bit about it in a moment. But first, I would be remiss if I didn't thank a bunch of people. First, Penny Stamps, who has an amazing name. And though I haven't met her, I'm a little jealous of her name. And of course, the divine Amanda Kruliak. My very own, she belongs to me, and though we're in the dark, in a moment we won't be, Meg Roberts. Most of the work that you will see in the gallery is in part made by my studio manager, Meg Roberts, a VCU alum extraordinaire. Sid Smith, Meg Sweeney, who I believe put my name in for this opportunity, Lucy Cahill, and then these amazing teachers, David Doris, Taya Miles, Reagan Gillen, and most importantly, their students and the Stamps and Color students that I had the privilege of working with. So you guys, I know you're here. Can you just give yourselves a round of applause? You made, yeah. So I'm here for you, but I'm also here because of you. And I know a lot of you from the Stamp School have to be here. So as you sit there, I'm going to give you permission because I know there aren't going to be questions here. There are going to be questions when we go over to the Institute of the Humanities later. But I'd love to be in dialogue with students. I love to be in dialogue with my audience. So this is the first part of the conversation. The second part is going to happen at the gallery. But if you want to respond in real time, I just want to give you permission to Instagram, tweet, do all of that good stuff. And I'm going to actually ask our house manager to turn the lights up so I can take a photograph of you guys and just start there. Yeah. Because I have to tell you, this is what happened a moment ago. Someone said to me, "What organ piece would you like me to play before your talk?" And that has never happened before. So, Michigan, you guys do it right. I mean, I have to say, all right? I'm greatly appreciative for that. So, we can have the high slides back down, thank you. And there you go, my beloved audience. I'm going to show you 40 slides. They're not in any linear progression because I'm a circular thinker. So you're going to see the resurgence of things that come back and back again. I am going to tell you that the premise of my work is guided by this quotation by Toni Morrison. They straightened out the Mississippi River in places to make room for houses and livable acreage. Occasionally, the river floods. Now, floods is the word that we use. But in fact, the river is not flooding. What the river is doing is remembering. The river is remembering where it used to be. All water has a perfect memory that way. And then Toni Morrison goes on to say, Writers are like that, like water. I remember where I was before I was straightened out. I like to think artists are like that too. So write this down. You are going to tweet me. You are going to follow me on Instagram. If you get bored about this talk, or if you have questions later, you can go to my website. So write it down, write it down, write it down. This is your moment. That slide's not going to be up forever, right? So I have to tell you that I'm really happy to be back in Michigan, and I'm happy because, as Amanda mentioned, I was a grad student at Cranbrook, so I love Cranbrook. I love Cranbrook people in the house. I know. There they are. They will turn up. They will turn up. My first solo show ever in my career was in Detroit at the Fisher Building. The National Conference of Artists supported me in my very, very first solo show. So my first solo show was in Detroit. Love Detroit. And then I really have no complaints about winning ArtPrize. I don't. No, I don't. So that's only topped by the opportunity of being here in Michigan twice this fall. It's really, really been a wonderful thing. So I'm going to get one of the questions that often comes up at the end of a presentation just out of the way. People ask me, what advice do you have for students? What advice do you have for young artists? So I'm just going to tell you what that advice is, and then we'll move on with the artist talk. So here it is. Find your authentic obsession. Doesn't matter if someone else is working in a similar way. If it is your authentic obsession and you have found it, you will know. You will know because in critique, someone will say, why don't you do this thing? And you'll say, I just can't do that, because it bumps against what your authentic obsession is. But it still allows you to be open to looking deeply, feeding it, exploring it, and then finally figuring out a way how to connect that authentic obsession to others. And then you never, ever, ever let it go. That's my advice. So one of my authentic obsessions is this thesis, that hairdressing is a primordial fiber art form. So at some point, I decided that I wanted to activate that question in every possible way. And we'll get back to that. That's, in fact, what the premise of the Haircraft Project was. But I started with textiles. So you heard Amanda say earlier that I studied with Nick Cave. He became a very, very dear friend and mentor to me when I was at the Art Institute of Chicago as a student. And I was studying fiber with him. And I became interested in textiles. That was my second degree, my second undergraduate degree. But I became interested in textiles because I thought, if I'm going to have a conversation, artwork is about conversation or connection or community or any of those premises, then I should pick a material, I should pick a substance that we're already in dialogue with one another through. So just as none of you came nude into this room, you're all wearing clothes, clothes are touching you in very private places. You have a deep and profound understanding of what cloth is. And because human beings have been making cloth for a long, long time, working with textiles and fibers, it means that we are already versant in using it in really beautiful, beautiful metaphoric ways. So I want to share with you this image, which both talks about my heritage, that idea that Maya Maya Angelou, I call her Maya like I know her, Maya Angelou was talking about in terms of going back to remembering where you once were. So that, a little bit about my heritage, but also this idea of using textiles as a way of remembering, as a way of communicating. So I've been thinking about how artwork forms and engages and defines community. And for those of you who are interested in this kind of work, Pablo Helguera's work, which frames the creative participation and collaborative participation, is really, really a helpful text. So I think about cloth as being like DNA, like it's something that structures who we are. And we've been communicating and designing with cloth across generations. So the image that you see on the left-hand side of this slide has to do with, a very personal image for me, it has to do with my father's heritage. My father's now an ancestor, and he was from Trinidad. My mother was from Jamaica, is from Jamaica still. So Oh, some of you are following me. Well done. I'm keeping track. You get an A+, I'm going to tell your professors. Anyway, so my father's from Trinidad, and a lot of people who were forcibly migrated through the Middle Passage, who are of African descent, who ended up in Trinidad, are from Yoruba heritage, Yoruba of Nigeria and Benin. Now, what you're looking at is a celebration of the ancestors. This is the egungun. The egungun is this like living quilt, strips of highly elaborately decorated cloth. And when this cloth is danced, the audience has the privilege of having this spinning cloth breezing past their ears as if the ancestors are whispering voices. Now, that kind of metaphor makes me want to be a textile artist, right? So clearly, some Nigerians, some Yoruba were also transported to Jamaica, where my mother is from. So you see sort of the poor person's version of in Pitchy Patchy, the strips of cloth, not highly decorated, but still there nonetheless. This idea of having cloth and masquerade like this, standing in for monument when everything about your heritage is pulled away, is actually really important to me, that cloth can be a monument. Now, here's the thing. My mom's from Jamaica, and the Jamaican motto is out of many, one people, which is based on the population's multiracial roots. So on my mom's side of the family, there's every kind of person that you can imagine, like everybody in this audience, you could be at my family reunion, and we'd be like, yeah, that's just, second cousin once removed. Regardless of how different we might look from each other, that's the way my family is. So like a lot of Jamaicans, I have Scottish roots. My mother's maiden name is McCarty. It's not a slave name. It's my great-grandfather's name. And so all the Scots in the house, yay, yeah, right? All the Jamaicans in the house. Hey, wait, there's always a Jamaican in the crowd. No Jamaicans? There we go. All right. There's always a Jamaican in the crowd. So in the Highlands of Scotland, where my great-grandfather, Alexander McCarty, was from, they have this tradition of these clootie wells. Clootie is a Gaelic word for rag. And so there are these naturally occurring springs in the Highland of Scotland. People would normally take pilgrimages to those places, take their family tartan. This is my family tartan. Don't judge me, I was not there when it was designed. They would take their family tartan, dip a piece of it in this naturally occurring well, wash the afflicted part of their body that needed to be healed, rip part of that cloth and tie it to the nearest tree. So when you see a clootie well covered with rags and strips of cloth, it means it's a very powerful well. And you can tell its power by the presence of the people who are there. So this is the point that I ask you. Given the Nigerian heritage and given the Scottish heritage, did I really have a choice in being a textile artist? Probably not, right? So at some point I decided if I really want to understand something about textiles in Africa, I should go to a place where textiles speak. So I decided to go to West Africa. So this is in 1989. I just graduated from Amherst College, and I decided, and my parents' gift to me was to send me to West Africa. I had hoped to go to Ghana, where this cloth, kente cloth, is from, but I didn't quite make it there. I made it to the Ivory Coast. So that is me weaving on the top right-hand side of the slide for the first time on one of these very traditional looms. These similar looms are used to make cloth like the kente cloth that you see just below me. This cloth literally speaks. Now, we know this in our own language. Cloth has been around so long that text and textile have the same root, right? That we've been using textiles as a way to communicate with each other is nothing new. We've been doing this for a long time. In this part of Ghana, very intense textiles that are woven on seemingly simple looms, like the one that you see me working on, have names like this. That cloth below me is called adwenasa, which means my skill is exhausted. And it's king's cloth. So you know, in the 1990s, one of the reasons I was interested in kente cloth is that it was being used everywhere for branding. You know, so if AT&T wanted you to switch your phone service to them and you were a black person, they'd just stick some kente cloth on it, right? So I thought, well, let me figure out what's going on with this branding. Now, this is the thing about textiles and craft in general. One of the reasons that I'm a craft person is that I believe that I'm part of a legacy, and it's a multiracial legacy. I believe that on the African side of the legacy, I know that there was a time, and there is a legacy of this too, there was a time when African bodies were just simply treated as chattel. But if you had skills, craft skills, if you had basket making skills, textile weaving skills, blacksmithing skills, pottery skills, you were more valued. You weren't human, but you were more valued. And it's part of that legacy that I give homage to by being a craft person and an artist. So I have a friend, art historian Henry Druel, who used to say, Africans came empty-handed. These are Africans who came through the Middle Passage. They came empty-handed, but not empty-headed. And I like to change that a little bit and say they didn't come empty-handed either. We came with a skill of knowledge of craftsmanship in our hands as well. And so when I was a graduate student at Cranbrook, I decided that I wanted to take this idea of textiles, specifically Ghanaian kente textiles, that had proverbs tied to each of the patterns that are interwoven, and bring that together with the American flag. So you can see that this flag is unapologetically African and American, right? So here's the thing, in my lifetime, people who look like me, people of African descent in this nation have been called, and these are the nice names, not the unnice names, but colored, my grandmother used colored, Afro-American, African-American, black, people of color, which is general, but you know, all of these names to talk about people of African descent in this country. So when I made this piece, I made it on a Western loom, but in the style of the West African cloths that you saw in strips that then were sewn together. And I took it to 50 women who in Detroit. And I asked them to tie their heads with this cloth. And while their heads were tied, I asked them to tell me what they knew about kente cloth. And I shared with them what I had researched about kente cloth. And I also asked them to tell me what they thought about the American flag. So we were talking about identity with cloth as being our medium of conversation. So that's a little bit about using pattern and cloth and bringing those together. I should tell you that the patterns that I was using in particular from kente cloth, that green and red and black one, that goes red and green again, refers to a fertility healing plant. The one just below that refers to a snail shell and has this idea, this proverb woven into it of being self-sufficient. And then the very bottom one that looks like red steps against a yellow wall is steps, odd way, and that means self-advancement. So I was very particular about the proverbs that I was weaving into this cloth. And I told you this isn't a linear talk. So that piece is from 1995, and I want to show you something from 2013. So you know I'm from the Caribbean. My African ancestors who got to the Caribbean got there because of this simple grass that is growing. This is sugarcane. Sugar was the drug of trade, right? At the time of the transatlantic slave trade. So I decided that I wanted to make an updated cloth that talked about my heritage and talked about my identity, but really this time was much more about the materiality of the cloth. So this is my family tartan, again, the Scottish tartan, and even my Scottish great-grandfather got there to run a plantation that had sugarcane. This family tartan is woven from bagasse. Bagasse is once you squeeze out all the sugar from the sugar cane, it's what you would throw away. And it can be made and repurposed and recycled into an actually quite luxurious, drapey, sort of rayon-y cloth. So I made yards and yards and yards of that, long enough to make a kilt. So here's the thing. Earlier this year in the winter, I had two aunts who became ancestors, two of my Jamaican aunts. One of them lived in Boston, but one of them lived in Jamaica. And when I went to her funeral, I thought, I really want to take this cloth with me, because this cloth is really about my family. And I want to celebrate this heritage with my family. But, I'm thinking like an artist. Like I want to take formal portraits of each one of my family members draped in this cloth, right? But is that appropriate at a funeral? Now, you don't know this about me because I have such a fabulous shirt on, and Amanda told you that I love vintage shopping. You would think I'm a clothes horse, but when I pack really light. I have this little tiny suitcase, and this is a lot of cloth. It took up more than half of my suitcase, so do I bring it or not bring it? Do I bring it or not bring it? Well, I decided to bring it, and at some moment at the repast, I said, let me just bring out this cloth and share it with my family members. So I brought it out. Everyone knew that it was a family tartan. Everybody knows a family tartan. Everybody knows a family tartan. So I bring it out, and I think, okay, so I just want to share this with you. And they go, oh my God, that is something we all must be draped in now. So I'm just telling you that they owned the cloth. Like, this cloth no longer belongs to me. I inadvertently made an heirloom. It's so bad that there are family members who couldn't come to these funerals who said, when are you coming to Scotland? When are you coming to Ghana? When are you coming to Australia? All the places that my Jamaican family has migrated to. And when are you bringing the cloth? They don't even want to see me. They want to see the cloth. So there's something about this empowerment of bringing people and the heritage and the story that's embedded in the cloth to the people, right? I thought I was going to take individual photographs, art photographs, but everybody was pulling out their iPhone. The piece lives in their memory and is empowered by it. So I want to share with you another piece that I made a few years ago. I started it in 1998, and it's still continuing. And it's made again with this idea of the collective. So it was taking simply 1 + 1 = 2. That's the easiest way of describing this slide. So on the top, you're seeing a gentleman, a West African gentleman, who is covered in these amulets that are either filled with Islamic texts that are thought to be healing or powerful medicinal stuffs, but they're really thought to protect him, right? And you can see just the mass of them, they almost become like armor. So those amulets and packets were part of the thing that inspired me, and the accumulation of them. And then at the time, because I was commuting between Madison, Wisconsin, and Baltimore, Maryland, my studio was really in airports and on airplanes. So I was doing a lot of beadwork. And I thought about the etymology of the word bead. So bead and prayer share the same etymology because of rosary beads, because they're the physical thing that our hand would use to remember where we are in our prayer cycle. And so I started this project called the Beaded Prayers Project, which is kind of ironic because I'm actually not a person who celebrates any particular religion. What I asked people to do was write down their wishes, hopes, dreams, aspirations, or prayers, and to contribute them to the project. And 5,000 people from 35 nations did. So that's all just a little background to tell you about my obsession with engaging people in textiles. But let's get to the hair, shall we? So hairdressing as a first textile art form. I've known this since I was a child. I've known this since I was cute like that. I've known this because this was the 70s, I grew up in Washington, D.C. The ambassador of Benin, then the country was called Dahomey, West Africa, lived right across the street from us in a big mansion. We lived in a very modest home. And he lived in a big mansion, and it's a good thing it was a big mansion, 14 children, 14. My sister and I would go across the street in the 70s. My parents would just sort of drop us off in the household. You have a household of 14 kids, you drop two strange kids in there, you're not even going to notice, right? So we would go over there, and then we would get these elaborate, wonderful hairdos. So from a very young age, I understood that hairdressing was an art form, that it was sculpture on my head. I knew that happiness was not having to have your hair combed daily, but maybe only once every 2 weeks or so. So there was good payoff for that. But there was also this sort of magnificent thing that happened. You know, whenever I was getting my hair done, by whomever I was getting my hair done, I was sitting between the legs, inevitably, of a young woman or an older woman. And that's sacred space. So this idea that hairdressing is vanity doesn't quite work with me. I actually think of it as being ritual activity. While I was in DC and getting my hair done, this guy, J.D. Ojikere, the late, wonderful J.D. Ojikere, the recently departed Nigerian photographer, he too knew that hair was monumental, and he was taking photographs of women in West Africa. So as I was getting my hair done by West Africans in Washington, D.C., he was taking photographs of West Africans doing the thing they do, wonderful, fantastic hairdressing. And I wanted to remember those hairstyles that I had as a child. So I made this wig series, of which I'm only showing 3 of them, they're 12 in all, that were my attempt at remembering those sculptural hairstyles I had as a child. For some reason, my mother only photographed that one that I showed you, just one of them. I will never forgive her. I love her, but I will never forgive her for this. So I was trying to remember all the hairstyles that I had. So I have a confession. I sort of covet writers. You know that thing that Amanda did where she read this beautiful text, so beautifully written? And I'm just speaking extemporaneously to you. I have a friend who's a poet, and I kind of love and hate writers because they can be really succinct, and that is not my skill, which you probably already know. Anyway, so I met this poet named Kim Stafford, and Kim sent me a poem that basically summed up everything that I think about hairdressing and textiles and natural hair care and the Black community in a poem. And for that, I both love and hate him. But I'm going to share it with you. Also, this is a picture of Kim, because I used to not show, I just used to just say Kim Stafford, read the poem, and then everyone thought he was a sister from Atlanta. That's never right. But I love that he's a white dude who appreciates a good hairstyle that he couldn't have. So the poem. You go out, you see cornrows, interlocks, microwave, and on the street the women and the men are fully dressed in goddess braids, flat twists, Senegalese, the mind made festive by pixie dreads. Sun seeks the neat detail, rain glistens on the perfect weave, crochet, tropical twist, invisible. You without style, where did you lose the power to discover the beautiful work of the human hand, intelligent in the finer things? Okay, the part I'm most pissy about is that he gets craft theory in there in like the last 2 lines. Anyway, but we do love him because he has a good hair, he's clearly brilliant. So, aside from that little joke, this one I'm serious about. This is the best hairstyle. I'm just letting you know. I'm just letting you know that it's the best hairstyle because I think it's important that you know it, but I also, I want you to know that I have had my hair straightened, and so I know what it is like to have gravity respondent hair. You know what I mean? Like it swings when you walk? I know what that is. I grow gravity-defying hair, which means that I'm not, my hair left in its natural state, so not braided but just out, it is responding to the universe in every direction. And I actually frankly wish that for all of you, even those of you who naturally grow gravity-respondent hair. Because I've had your experience, I'd love you to have mine. So I think it is the best hairstyle. I think it's resplendent. I think it's crowning glory. And it's also a lot of hard work. Don't think this guy came by this naturally. He was picking and patting a lot to get this kind of perfection. So I wanted to share that perfection with someone who was responsible for me being here with you today, though I've never met this gentleman. You all know him. Without Abraham Lincoln and his resplendent afro, I would not be here with you today. Now, here's the thing. I've shown this image a lot. And a scholar came up to me after a talk once and said, "Did you know that Abraham Lincoln is a little black on his mama's side?" Which I did not know, but it does explain why he looks better in an afro. Because he has that little receding hairline thing, and that, no hate on that. Gentlemen who have receding hairlines, you in fact have more testosterone. So, but I'm just saying that he looks better in an afro, right? Right? Yeah. Not everyone does, but he does. So this is the thing. This piece is a little funny. I realize that. I'm collapsing 1960 and 1860, right? I'm collapsing some race things. White guy, afro, black hair, right? But it's also on a $5 bill. So when Abraham Lincoln was making that decision about the Emancipation Proclamation, his ethics were in the right place, but he was also making an economic decision. And I don't want that to be lost on us as well. It's a complicated thing, but it was a complicated thing in many ways. I get worried when we flatten our history, when he becomes an angel saint, right? Which he probably was not an angel saint, right? Because I know I'm not, right? Anybody an angel saint in the room? I didn't think so. All right, so I made 44 of those for Obama. It was a little bit like hair is prayer. I thought if I make Afro Abe, if I sort of make him into a black president, maybe we'll elect a black president. It worked. That's why, because I made 44 of these, this is why Obama got elected. You thought it was your vote, but it's not. It was these pieces. So much more recently, I've been thinking about the materiality and making currency out of bagasse. So again, that idea of sugarcane, squozen, with the sugar taken out, using that to make paper pulp, using that to make currency. And then to just think about materiality and triangle trade. So this is one of the two pieces that's in the gallery. I'm not going to show you all the pieces. You have to actually go see the work, right? But this is a piece that I made prior to the show here. And it's called Triangle Trade, and you can see that it's perfect. It's a perfect triangle. It's as if slavery was a perfect thing that just happened. And it's called Triangle Trade. It sort of pisses me off a little bit. Human trafficking, suffering, it's complicated. Africans selling other Africans, Europeans, part of the market and big part of the market, all of that. It's complicated, right? But we sanitize it in this way. So the way that I'm depicting that is actually through cotton stitched on canvas and then cornrowed. So the cornrow standing in like a synecdoche for the human bodies, for human African bodies. And it's similar to what I used for to engage the women for the Haircraft Project, which we'll get to in a moment. So I live in Richmond, Virginia. Richmond, Virginia is the former seat of the Confederacy. That doesn't sound like a place that a Sonya would want to move to. But I love it there, I have to tell you. I totally love Richmond now. It's grown on me. However, in 2010, the governor, Bob McDonald, I did not elect him. I did not vote for him. I think he's an idiot. Yes, that's on tape. He declared April Confederate History Month. Okay, so here's the thing, honestly. Now, this might surprise some of you. I actually didn't have a problem with that because Richmond is the former seat of the Confederacy, and I'd never have a problem with us remembering our history. If we forget our history, we get ourselves in trouble. But if we don't remember the whole story, that's also going to get us in trouble. So he was just celebrating Confederate History Month with this proclamation without giving acknowledgement to all the economic contributions that the free labor of people of African descent have given to this country to make us the wealthy nation that we are. So, cornrows to make up the stripes of the American flag, cornrows, right? For the land that people of African descent worked. Bantu knots for the stars of the American flag. Bantu knots. Bantu, from the Bantu people, symbol of the people. So Africans, again, like a synecdoche, we didn't get from the Confederacy to the American flag without the help of African Americans. I'm not saying other people weren't involved. All my Latino and Asian folks out there, I love you too. This is just about this thing. I just had to have a little pushback at Governor Bob McDonald. You know, it's personal. It's personal. I'm happy to say that this piece lives in the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. So Amanda made reference to this piece, which I started the piece on the left, Unraveled, on the right, Unraveled, just as we hit it was April 9th, which was the 150th anniversary of the end of the Civil War. And I wanted to see what it would look like to completely dismantle a Confederate flag, to undo it thread by thread. It's a cotton flag, well-made cotton flag, undo it thread by thread. Would it feel as if it no longer had any power? Would it just simply be threads? Or does it always hold some of that resonance of the Confederacy in it? So I made that piece with the help of my handy-dandy studio assistants. And then for the show as well, I decided that what the piece needed was to do unraveling, to actually engage people in helping me unravel the Confederate flag. Now, to be honest, I was making these pieces in response to this nation's continued struggle with criminal justice, racial inequality, all of that stuff that was just bombarding us and continues to bombard us, but is undeniable. Like, how far have we actually come? How far have we actually come? So yeah, I'm standing here, thanks Abe, but how far have we actually come in terms of racial equality and criminal justice? So I engaged people, because it's always better with people, to join me in slowly, thread by thread, unraveling a Confederate flag as much as we could get it unraveled at that particular opening. And then, as Amanda said, about 10 days later, 9 people were killed in a church. So there's more work to be done. Okay, but where's the hair? Let's get back to the hair. So this idea of working with hair is not new. It's not new at all. Victorian hair wreaths, working with hair in beautiful, beautiful fiber ways. This Victorian hair wreath, if you want to know, is from the mid-1880s. I think I was first exposed to these by my teacher at the Art Institute of Chicago, Ann Wilson, who was a fabulous artist who works with hair as well. So the idea that I'm working with hair also has roots with some of the teachers that I had the privilege of studying with. And she's fabulous. She's a fabulous artist. Look her up, Ann Wilson. Write that down, students. So I wanted to make a hair wreath that was made out of hair that was a little bit more like mine. It's not my own hair, but it's a friend's hair. It's the first piece I made out of human hair. And the reason it's the first piece that I made out of human hair, I think this is from 2001, is that Jamaican mother that I told you about. When I was growing up, she said, you know, if you cut or comb your hair, you're supposed to get rid of that hair properly, because someone could do something bad to you if they get a hold of your hair. And while that could sound like sort of an old wives' tale or some sort of superstition, I always think about this now. When I look at CSI or something like that, like, you do not want your DNA in the crime scene. You just don't want it in the wrong place, right? So my mom was sort of onto something. And it prevented me for many years from working with my own hair, but I got over it. So this piece is made with my own hair, much to my husband's chagrin. And when I comb my hair, I'll save little hair balls, make them into little felted balls. I leave them all over the house. He's like, here's another one, you know. Because it's a funny thing how hair is sexy if it's on us, and then it's really not so sexy if it's not on us. Like that disembodiment, there's something there. So I happened to find this box called Heritage Pearls, and it just seemed like a perfect place to have this, this piece. My husband was really happy they got strung up and put into a piece, too. This idea of using thread as a way in which we think of who we are, not only our lives, but our DNA and our legacy. So that's what a hair is. It's not only who I am individually, but it has our DNA in it. So it's actually who and how we are collectively. My DNA is really the same as everybody in this room, right? And we spend a lot of time marking the difference. So it's but once individual and collective. So there is this is like, for the textile people in the crowd, this is like my geeky little textile moment for you. This is an early 16th century tapestry at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And I love it because it's sort of postmodern. It's a textile about a textile metaphor. So it's a tapestry that shows you the three fates: Clotho, who spins the thread of life; Lachesis, who allots the length of the thread; and Atropos, who does a snip. So this idea of the thread measuring a life is really interesting to me. And here it is in a 16th century tapestry. We've been working with textiles for a long time and using them to communicate with one another. So I decided to see, what does it look like if we measure a life in a dreadlock? How long would that be? Turns out that it's about 30 feet. If you grew a dreadlock from a child, it's all the hair you're growing plus felted to all the hair you're currently growing. That's what a dreadlock is, really, just felted hair, right? It would be 30 feet long if you lived to 100. So I did a print of that and a detail so you can see that, using hair to measure who we are. But that wasn't enough. So I worked on this little piece. So this is an abacus, because it's titled Abacus. You guys could help me with this. I'm awful at naming pieces. It's like black hair flag, abacus, like, ugh, yeah, anyway. I could use some poetry in my life. Anyway, so abacus is a small object. It's only 5 by 5 inches. It's not nearly as big as it looks here. And this abacus has the thousands, the hundreds, the tens, and the ones column. So the one on the right, the one on the left reads 1863, 1863. So 1863, which is the year of the Civil War started. And then the one on the right is 2015, right? So what I did, and I don't have time to share it with you today, is make a stop motion video. And every year I have to add another image to the video. I thought that was a good idea at the time that I made the piece. Anyway, so it's measuring how far we've come from 1863 to the present. Now, considering that I am married to a very talented, and yes, I'm biased, but I'm also right about this, I'm married to a very talented musician who chairs the music department at Virginia Commonwealth University. It took me a long time to make a piece that put hair and music together. And it wasn't because of Daryl Harper. It wasn't because of that guy I fell in love with a long time ago. It's because of Maya Angelou. Because I read this quote and I thought, that's kind of brilliant. My hair, a hive of honeybees, is a queenly glory, crackles like castanets, hums like marimbas. And I went, huh, hair and music. And my husband was going, I'm a little slow. This is also one of the prompts that I used with one of the classes that I had the privilege of working with Taya Miles's class, to prompt some of the poetry that they wrote for the interactive piece that's in the show. But what it inspired me to do was to rehair 2 violin bows. with human hair. So the one on the top is made of a dreadlock of my own hair, an off-body dreadlock. I felted my hair to a dreadlock. And the one on the bottom is made out of what seems to be blonde hair, but is actually Asian hair dyed blonde. The one on the top was made out of free hair, because I grow it like that. The one on the bottom was sourced from $300 worth of hair that I had to buy. Regina Carter is a MacArthur-winning, a MacArthur Fellow, a genius and a friend. She's an amazing jazz violinist. I asked her to play on the, to play 2 national anthems. I wanted to hear what the ancestors sounded like, right? What does our DNA sound like, right? If it's activated. So I asked her to play the Anybody know what that is? Lift every voice and sing. You guys are in the dark, but I just wanted to make sure you're still there. So she's playing on with my hair and all of my ancestors. Who knew that's what my great-great-grandfather sounded like? Lift every voice and sing. And then she also played the national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, on both of these bows. And then they're overlapped and overlaid. America the Beautiful, Lift Every Voice and Sing, all of those interplays. Don't have time for all of those now, but you can just imagine like the idea of hearing one's ancestors. So when we all go to the gallery, all of us, and I will be taking attendance, you'll see that there's some pieces that are made out of combs, because it's sort of logical that if you're obsessed with hair as an art form, from both as a medium and the subject and all of that good stuff, that you're eventually going to get to the tool of hairdressing. But the tool, like any other tool, or like any other medium that I use, can be mined for some meaning. So I opted to use fine-tooth plastic combs. First, because of their linearity, like they're very simple to use. Also because I found a really good source for them. Secondly, because they sort of stand in for something racially. Fine-tooth combs are not intended for my hair in its natural state. In its straightened state, sure, but not in its natural state. So it says something about straight-haired people or straightened-haired people versus people who have their hair that's very, very curly like mine. There's a proverb that a Nigerian friend of mine shared with me, Balaji Campbell. And the proverb is that you don't know who you are unless you can name yourself 10 generations back. You don't know who you are. Like, your individuality doesn't count. Like, whoever you think you are, you don't know who you are unless you can name some people back in your heritage. 10 generations back. That's kind of far back, right? Now, for most African Americans, unless you happen to be from a family where there are lots of young people having children young, that's really hard to go back 10 generations back, right? In my family, as I told you, the Scots, the only way I can get 10 generations back is through my great-grandfather, right? And then we're at the Highlands of Scotland. So I stand before you today as an African-American woman, and I can name you 10 generations back on my Scottish side, right? So that's sort of this ironic thing, right? And of course, it's because of the human trafficking that took place that brought my African side here. So I wanted to depict what that looks like. What does 10 generations back look like? So that singular comb that's against the baseboard, let's pretend that's me or you, right? And then you have 2 parents. That's 1 generation back. And then your grandparents, that's 2 generations back. Your great-grandparents, that's 3 generations back. This is 10 generations back. It's 1,025 people, including the original comb. And it keeps doubling, right? You get it, right? It keeps doubling. So 11 generations back, it's 2,048, right? That's how many people made you. That's how many people we were listening to as, and more, as Regina is playing that violin bow. And again, I was using combs because they're the tool. You can't weave on a loom without something that looks like a comb. You can't comb your hair without, well, combing your hair, right? But the textile police came after me. She's working with plastic, she's left textiles, da-da-da-da-da. And I want to keep everyone happy, sort of, right? So I decided I need to make a textile. So I made a textile out of combs. And this should make kind of a reference to this, right? And then I wanted to close the loop a little bit by taking the combs back to the curly hair that they're not intended for. So and then I really started thinking about the most phenomenal hairdresser, and people love to hate this hairdresser, but I don't have any hate for her, Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker is one of the first self-made women millionaires in this nation. You will, if you've heard about Madam C.J. Walker, you probably have heard things like, well, she popularized straightening products for African American women. You probably heard that she was the first black woman to make $1 million. That's not true. People just want you to know she's black, but she's not the first black woman to be a self-made millionaire. She's one of the first women. She did that. She was born in 1867. So imagine, like, she was born just as we are all free. And then she's also a woman, which means she can't vote. And she's a black person, which means she can't vote until the 1960s, right? And she was so empowered by raising herself from working in the cotton fields of the South into being a hair maven and entrepreneur. So I had to make a comb portrait of her, because you can tell I have a little love for her. And then I had to make another one. So here you can see a detail of how this piece is made with the teeth of the combs taken out. So I want to get to this project, the Haircraft project. Note that there's a website on the bottom. The website on the bottom is because while I can't let you all take home the Haircraft project with you, the actual photographs and canvases, you too could have a little catalog. If you just go to this website and you would like to buy one. Shameless promotion, right? What is in this fabulous catalog that was designed by a VCU alum is images of all the women who did my hair for the 14-month run of the Haircraft project. What I did was I went to these women and I said, do my hair. And they said, okay. I said, well, there's some rules, no cutting and coloring maybe, but not permanent, no straightening, you know. You can add some hair if it suits the style, but it's not about long, flowy hair. Good, they got that, fine. Also, can I give you this canvas? It's like this one on the bottom right. I'm gonna give you this canvas, because I think you're a textile artist, so will you just do this too? And that's when they were like, no. Yeah, but they did it anyway, because I'm quite convincing. And they did this fabulous job. So remember the simple triangle trade piece that I did that I was so proud of? This is what they did. So that thesis that hairdressing as a textile art form was confirmed in their hands. When the Haircraft project won the Grand Jurors ArtPrize, they all got a cut of that, right? Of course. And so just to give you a sense of the way that the project was installed, this idea of mirroring, so each canvas that each hairdresser made was across from the piece, the photograph that she did of me, and then that's the hairdresser that's there, so you would know the hairdresser's face. The last little project that I did with hairdressers, and this is remnants of it, was in Boston. So the Haircraft project, I should say, was recently acquired by the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. They're all getting some of that sale too. These ladies are like, oh, I'm glad I said yes to the crazy lady who wanted me to do that art thing. So I wanted to go to one of the hairstylists and say, let's bring to life some hairstyles that exist in antiquity, from antiquity. So this is from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, an Akan ceremonial head from the 16th or 18th century. And then I asked Nasira Muhammad, who was one of the stylists that I worked with in Richmond, to interpret it on my head. The style that I have before you is a really toned down version of a similar thing that I did with a Boston hairstylist, except we did it in the museum, so it was alive. And it was fabulous. The questions that people asked, you know, that were scared of asking about black hair and hairstyling and opinions and all of that, we just shared, we just talked, it was like gossiping in a hair salon, and I had fabulous, fabulous hair. And I have, okay hair now, but it was fabulous. It was huge. I couldn't even fit my shirt over my head. It was amazing. I know all of you have a hair story in you. And so one of the projects that's up in the gallery is this project called Pluck and Grow. I've asked people to write down stories. Some of you have done this. To write down stories, white ink on white paper. And then I've dyed those pieces of paper in the color of hair colors, from blonde to brunette to very dark. There's some auburns in there too. Not too many redheads, sorry. Sorry, just didn't, And then they've twisted those into these hair-like things and inserted them into the wall. Now what I'm inviting all of you to do is to go to this piece, pluck a hair, undo that story. It's like DNA, reading someone's story that's written in the hair. Write a story on white paper, twist that up, and put that in the place of the one that you plucked. And the piece will age over time. It'll get wiser over time. I can't wait to hear your hair stories. I can't wait to hear your questions as we move to the gallery. That is my last slide, and I thank you.